Mr. Amin, what's next after this verdict? What are the next steps to statehood and elections? Break it down for us.
I'm sure that the government is going to be held a poll in the State Assembly of the J&K, and before the 30th September, as the Supreme Court has given the verdict about the election and direction to the Election Commission of India to clear the everything and done the elections in the state before that. As you know that in Election Commission we have already all preparations done before that, like delimitations and reservation of the seats and everything, and we have all exercises completed. So we are not in trouble to do election as soon as possible. We are ready, and our system is ready for the poll in the state of J&K.
Ashok, how important was today's verdict in the context of, the fact that this is something this is ground that we've never, walked on before. First the state is turned into a union territory, it's bifurcated, and then you have elections announced, and then statehood, in fact. How is this going to play out in the next couple of months?
Firstly, that number one, it's a very important milestone as far as the Indian judiciary is concerned. Now, this is a question which has been waiting to be adjudicated for the last 75 years. The Supreme Court today has put everything to rest here by saying that Article 370 was a temporary provision. The second thing is that they have said that as far as statehood is concerned, the central government should endeavor to return Jammu and Kashmir back to full statehood.
Right.
But the third thing they have said is that you have to conduct elections to the Legislative Assembly by 30th September 2024. Now here is the caveat. The Supreme Court does not say that by 30th September 2024 you return to full statehood.
Right.
The court says that under the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, the elections will have to be held. So what we are really looking at is by September 30th, 2024, is that there could be a legislative assembly.
Yeah.
But that legislative assembly will not be that of a state. It could be a legislative assembly still of be a union territory.
Union territory.
So we could see an administrator, a legislative assembly, a situation similar to what we see in Delhi.
Right.
So where you have a chief minister, elected chief minister, but at the same time you have a lieutenant governor who also calls the shots in the state. So this is the scenario. What I'm looking at is by September 30, 2024, we could have a structure in place, something similar to that in Delhi, where the LG will be there, and most importantly, the LG or the governor, whatever they want to call it, or the administrator, would still exercise functions and control over the law and order situation in this particularly volatile union territory, I would say.
Right. Dr. Nanda, was the court very ambiguous about the way ahead? As in, it's left a lot of leeway for the government to decide, right? I mean, it's given a time frame of about 9 months, but obviously it's left all this for the government to do. Do you agree with what my colleague Ashok here says, that it's quite possible it could be a Delhi model of a half state with a legislative?
Yeah, Ashok has put it very beautifully. See, this is a situation, things are looking very hunky-dory at the moment.
Right.
Supreme Court has passed an order, hold elections by 30th September. Now, elections to what? To the UT or to the state assembly?
Right.
Yes, the state government will come, the central government or whatever deciding authority will be there. Just now somebody from the election commission said that they are ready with the delimitation exercise and all that.
Right.
But the point is, if the central government puts its foot down, that the atmosphere in the state is not ripe enough to hold elections, they can still defer it. The Supreme Court has only said, make an endeavor.
Right.
It is not a direction that you necessarily will have to hold. If they put up some material which is good enough to defer it, they can still defer it.
Right.
And whether the elections will be held as Ashok has just said, whether to the Legislative Assembly of the state or the Legislative Assembly of the UT. So I have my big doubts that we'll have elections by September 24, even to UT.
Right.
This will continue, because otherwise, if the situation is ripe enough. The Home Minister at that point of time in 2019, when it was bifurcated into two parts, it was assured that this is a temporary phase, and as soon as possible, as soon as the normalcy returns, the full statehood will be granted.
Right.
I mean, nothing. I just visited last week. Also, I was there in Srinagar. Nothing is appearing on the face of it that the central government is interested in holding the elections there, because otherwise, if they hold the elections, all the control is going to go away from them.
Right, Aditya, you've had your sorry, Dr. Nanda, I'm just going to get Aditya in on this point. You've had your ear on the ground on this, Aditya. You've tracking this, whether the state will hold elections or not, whether the government will actually hold elections or not. What are your sources telling you right now?
Well, firstly, Sandeep, this is a historic verdict. You know, many had predicted that it could be some kind of a balancing act that the Supreme Court could do. Many expected, knowing the Chief Justice, D.Y. Chandrachud as well, that, you know, he could strike it down. You know, all kinds of rumors were doing the rounds.
Yeah.
But I'm glad, and I expected, and I said this earlier in the show as well, early morning before the verdict, that it would be something positive. The larger call, the larger national interest would be also kept in mind by the judiciary. And I'm glad that this is a verdict which is unanimous in nature.
Right.
On the elections, I am pretty much sure that there is no pressure to hold elections right now.
Right.
There's a lot of cleansing that is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. One, related to corruption that was ingrained in the system. Second, to actually eradicate the jihadi mindset and the radicals from the system itself. That's why you see these orders every passing day of a lot of people in the government being fired for holding views that are against the country at different levels. So personally, I believe that the government could test waters when the general elections are held around April, May 2024, along with the rest of the country, and thereafter take a call whether the state elections can happen, the assembly elections, and how would that be facilitated, because that would require a huge security bandobast. But on the factor of statehood, again, I think elections is something still the government and the people would want at some stage. But I'm not sure or so sure about the statehood demand, because one of the major factors is law and order. And law and order has to be with center. I am of firm belief that one of the reasons that we had aggravated situation of violence in Jammu and Kashmir was, one, because of 370 and how it gave some kind of an intellectual support to the local politicians and separatists to further their agenda and keep people engaged and perhaps fooled into this dream of 370 and 35A and autonomy and self-independence. But at the same time, the law and order was a state subject. So every time, for example, stone pelters were arrested or antisocial elements were arrested under some law, you had the state government, for instance, Mehbooba Mufti, when she was the chief minister, who said that release them. You cannot act against them. We had another dramatic case of Major Aditya, who had to fire at the antisocial elements when they almost were about to be lynched, and Mehbooba Mufti registered an FIR against the Indian Army, and that case went up to the Supreme Court of India. So there have been a lot of clashes in this regard, and law and order has to be with the center. So as of now, I think it's a very historic judgment, because not only has the judgment given a legal sanctity to Modi government's decision on 5th August 2019, but it has also given a clarity to the local politicians that there's no way out. 370 is something of the past. You need to look towards a future that does not involve 370, 35A autonomy or self-determination. It only involves a new politics in Jammu and Kashmir for the benefit of the people.
So Ashok, this ball is very much in the government's court, it looks like. I mean, it's left to the government. It's like a directive principles of state policy, right?
So in fact, there was an interesting observation by the Chief Justice of India while he was reading his verdict, was that some matters are policy issues. And the court will not step into the domain where policies are being made. So they have kind of kept away from that. Now, even as far as statehood is concerned, they have just expressed the hope that, saying that we have been given an assurance by the central government that as soon as the conditions are conducive, the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir will return back to statehood. But one criticism of this verdict clearly has to come is the fact that the Supreme Court has not adjudicated on the question of reducing a state to 2 union territories. Now, you
Right.
said rightly
Yes.
in the beginning that this is for the first time it has happened,
Yeah.
but the Supreme Court sidestepped this issue by saying that we are not going to get into it because we have an assurance from the central government.
Right.
So we are not adjudicating on this point of law whether the central government could have done it. Now,
Right.
at some point in time, this question will have to be decided, maybe 10, 15, 20 years later. What really happens is that it gives the central government unbridled power
Yeah.
to turn states into union territories. Now, this is today we are witnessing a case of Jammu and Kashmir. Tomorrow,
Yeah.
it could be any other state.
Right.
It could be reduced.
So you're saying it goes against the concept of federalism.
It does
And-
go against the concept of federalism. However, the only beautiful thing which emerged out of this judgment
Yeah.
was the whole idea of integration,
Right.
Yeah.
which the Supreme Court said that the underlying feature
Yeah.
of everything is integration. Number one, Jammu Kashmir, when it signed the instrument of accession, they surrendered their sovereignty to the government of India.
Yeah.
Now, Article 370 was a temporary provision to tide over situations and circumstances as they existed then.
It was a bridge from
It was a
the
bridge,
past to the present.
it was
yeah.
a temporary provision,
Yeah.
and it has to be done away
Right.
once the objects have been achieved.
Yeah.
Now, here the central government in 2019 believed that, look, the objectives of 370 have been accomplished.
Sure.
Now comes the process of integration.
Right.
So, for the larger goal of integrating this territory, this controversial area,
Right.
the government of India took this decision, and today the Supreme Court has said we find nothing wrong
Right.
legally with what the central government has done.
Right. Dr. Amin, so we've kind of established the fact that there's no pressure really on the government to hold elections. While there is a recommendation for September 2024, there's nothing binding. It's all left to the government. It can choose when to hold elections or even indeed defer them. But is there anything that says that elections, is there a time limit for elections to be held in the normal course? I mean, bear in mind this is a very unique kind of set of circumstances.
No, in case of Jammu and Kashmir, UT, the Ladakh is separate,
Yeah.
and JNK is separate now. 2 UTs are there. So the Supreme Court has clear for the JNK only, and he has not included the Ladakh in that state. So we are not in a hurry as per the ordinance of the Government of India and passed by the Parliament. So its direction by the Government of India can give to the and agree with the selection and give the direction to the Election Commission. You can go ahead for the election poll. So in that case, we have to intervene. Otherwise, till date, we have not received any communication for the Election Commission to go for the election. So just we can, and in case of the elections, Election Commission is always going to the state and see the situation, and always briefing done by the Chief Secretary and the Home Secretary and other officials to see the situation of the state. The election could be conducted or not. So our side and Election Commission side is everything clear for the election, but they are waiting for the government side to go through from the Ministry of Home Affairs or the Government of India. Otherwise, everything is okay. We can go for the elections, but we have to wait for the government orders from the state side and the central side both.
News9 Plus. Download now.